Well, hey folks, after 5.5 years of waiting, it finally happened. On Thursday afternoon, July 9th, inside a courtroom in Chula Vista, California, a jury of 12 people stood up and answered the question that has haunted one family, one community, and honestly, the entire true crime world since January of 2021. Did Larry Millete murder his wife Maya? And their answer was yes, guilty, murder in the first degree, willful, deliberate, and premeditated. And here's the part that stunned even the people who followed every single day of this trial. After nearly 2 months of testimony, after more than 60 witnesses and hundreds of pieces of evidence, that jury needed less than 1 day to reach their decision. So today, let's walk through what happened in that courtroom, how we got here, and what this verdict really means for a family that is still, even now, searching for Maya. Before we go any further, if you're new here, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications, because we're going to be following the sentencing and everything that comes next in this case. And if you've been with me a while, thank you. Go ahead and hit that like button so more people can find this story. Now, let's set the scene, because I think the moment itself deserves some time. It was just before 3 o'clock on Thursday afternoon when word started spreading through the South Bay courthouse that the jury had reached a verdict. And folks, think about how fast that was. The jury got this case on Wednesday afternoon. They deliberated somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 6 hours total. In a circumstantial case, in a case with no body, most legal experts will tell you that a quick verdict in a case like this usually means the jury walked into that room already seeing the same picture. And reportedly, that's exactly what happened. One of the jurors, a woman named Beverly Feldman, spoke to reporters afterward and said that when the jury took their very first vote on Thursday, every single hand went up for first-degree murder. 1 vote, unanimous. The courtroom itself filled up quickly. Maya's friends and family came in wearing green because green was Maya's favorite color. Her sister, Marie-Chris Drouaillet, the woman who made that very first call to police back in January of 2021, reportedly walked into the courtroom crying, arm in arm with her husband Richard. These are the 2 people who never stopped. They organized the searches. They kept Maya's name in the news. They sat through every day of this trial. And now they were about to hear 12 strangers decide whether the man married to their sister for 20 years would be held responsible for her disappearance. Judge Enrique Camarena reminded everyone in the room that no matter how emotional this moment was, there would be no screaming, no outbursts. And then the 4 persons stood up, and according to the reporters in that room, you could have heard a pin drop. Guilty of murder in the first degree. Larry Millete, 44 years old, turned around and looked at his parents sitting in the audience. Witnesses in the courtroom said his face was red, his eyes bloodshot, like he was holding back tears. And in the overflow room down the hall, where the friends and family members who couldn't get a seat were watching on a screen, there were sobs, there were embraces, and eventually, outside the courthouse, there was applause. Now, for anyone who needs the background, here it is, plain and simple. Maya Millete was a 39-year-old mother of 3 from Chula Vista, just south of San Diego. She worked hard, she loved her kids fiercely, and by early 2021, her 20-year marriage to Larry was falling apart. On January 7, 2021, the very same day she reportedly contacted a divorce attorney, Maya was seen alive for the last time. It was just days before one of her daughter's birthdays. Her phone went silent inside that house and never came back on. She never touched her bank accounts again. She never called her children again, and her body, to this very day, has never been found. Larry told everyone she simply left. He was arrested in October of 2021, and he has maintained his innocence ever since, sitting in jail for nearly 5 years waiting for this trial. He never took the stand in his own defense. In fact, the judge questioned him directly, on the record, to make sure he understood he had the right to testify and was choosing not to. He chose silence. And that set up the courtroom showdown we just watched. Deputy District Attorney Christy Bowles spent roughly 8 weeks and called more than 60 witnesses to build her case, piece by piece, that Larry was the only person on this earth with the motive, the means, and the opportunity. Her closing argument came down to one line she repeated like a heartbeat. Maya would not, could not, and did not leave her children. The defense, led by attorney Sabatini, called just a handful of witnesses and argued the state was asking jurors to guess. No body, no crime scene, no murder weapon, no eyewitness. They even suggested Maya could have climbed the backyard fence and slipped away through a drainage ditch, unseen by any camera. The jury heard both stories, and in less than a day, they chose one. But folks, here's the thing. The verdict is only the ending of one chapter, because the question everyone was asking on those courthouse steps Thursday afternoon wasn't just about guilt or innocence. It was the question Maya's family has been asking for 5.5 years. Where is she? In Part 2, I'm going to take you inside the evidence that convinced this jury, including the strangest, darkest piece of it all, something the jurors themselves say made the whole case. The Spellcasters. The Spellcasters. Folks, I've been following true crime for a long time, and I can tell you, this is one of the strangest pieces of evidence I have ever seen presented in an American courtroom. And I'm not the only one who felt that way. Remember juror Beverly Feldman, who spoke to reporters after the verdict? She said something remarkable. She said if Larry had never contacted those spellcasters, the jury probably wouldn't have been in that room at all. In her words, they wouldn't have had this decision. So let's talk about what she meant. In the months before Maya disappeared, Larry Millete reportedly began reaching out to online spellcasters. Now, if you've never heard of this, these are websites and individuals who claim, for a fee, that they can cast magic spells to change real events in your life. Love spells, obedience spells. And prosecutors showed the jury message after message that Larry allegedly sent to these people. And here's what mattered so much to this case. It wasn't just that he did it, it was how those requests changed over time. Because according to the prosecution, in the beginning, Larry was asking for spells to make Maya fall back in love with him. Then the requests reportedly shifted. Make her obey me. And then, in the weeks before January 7th, the requests turned darker still. He allegedly asked for spells to make Maya sick, to incapacitate her, to leave her weak enough, dependent enough, that she couldn't leave him. Now, obviously, nobody believes magic spells made Maya disappear. That's not the point. Prosecutor Christy Bowles told the jury the point was what those messages revealed about the inside of Larry's mind. Here was a man, in his own written words, allegedly wishing physical harm on his wife because she wanted a divorce. And Bowles pointed out one more detail, and folks, this one gave me chills. The moment Maya disappeared, the spell requests stopped, just like that. After months of desperate messages, silence. The prosecution's argument was simple. He stopped asking because he no longer needed to. And then there was the Hemlock. After Larry's arrest in October of 2021, investigators searching the Millete home reportedly found a small vial. When they tested the contents, it came back positive for coniine. Now, coniine is the poisonous compound found in poison hemlock, the same plant, if you remember your history, associated with the death of Socrates in ancient Greece. It causes paralysis. And prosecutors showed the jury that Larry had allegedly searched online numerous times for poison hemlock, along with other searches about ways to kill or incapacitate a person. Now, I want to be careful and fair here, because this matters. The prosecution never claimed they could prove hemlock is how Maya died. Bowles admitted to the jury, openly, that she could not tell them the exact method. Without a body, nobody can. But she argued the jury didn't need to agree on the how, they needed to agree on the who and the why. And interestingly, Feldman confirmed afterward that the jurors did not all have to settle on one method to reach their verdict. They looked at the whole picture. She called the case a massive puzzle. Now let's talk about that picture, because the spellcasters and the hemlock were only two pieces of it. The prosecution spent weeks showing the jury what they described as years of escalating control. Witnesses, Maya's friends, her relatives, her co-workers, testified that Larry allegedly tracked her whereabouts, controlled the family finances, and monitored her constantly. One friend reportedly testified that Larry got into Maya's social media accounts and blocked the people who were encouraging her to leave him. Think about that for a moment. Her support system, quietly cut off, one person at a time. And in a message from 2020, Maya herself wrote that Larry had a scary temper. She described a night when she reportedly locked herself in the bathroom to get away from him, and Larry punched through the door and tried to drill the handle out. Then came the timeline, and this is where the prosecution really tied the knot. Maya was last confirmed alive on January 7, 2021, the same day she reportedly contacted a family law firm about filing for divorce. Sometime that night, or early the next morning, her phone went dark inside that house, and it never came back on. And on the morning of January 8th, Larry's own phone reportedly cut its cell connections too. Then, at about 6:45 that morning, Larry allegedly left the family home in an SUV. He didn't come back until around 6 o'clock that evening. Nearly 12 hours, folks, and to this day, no full accounting of where he went. In the days that followed, he reportedly called out of work, something the jurors specifically pointed to afterward as evidence that weighed on them. Now, in fairness, let me give you the defense side, because they did have one. Attorney Sabatini argued that Larry was a heartbroken man, not a killer. The defense actually painted Larry as someone who was himself emotionally mistreated in the marriage, pointing to Maya's affair with a co-worker as proof the relationship was breaking down from both sides. Sabatini told the jury there is no playbook for heartbreak, and that a man this unsophisticated could never have pulled off a murder that left behind no body, no crime scene, and no weapon. Their final witness even testified that Maya could have climbed the backyard fence and left through a drainage ditch without a single camera catching her. The jury heard all of it, and Feldman gave us a window into how they saw the man at the center of it. She called Larry, and this is her phrase, a master manipulator. 12 people, 1 vote, first-degree murder. But folks, a verdict is not a sentence, and it's certainly not an ending. Larry Millete is due back in court on July 20th. There's still a weapons charge hanging over him, an appeal is all but guaranteed, and somewhere out there, a family is still searching for Maya. That's part 3. So where does this go from here? Because I know a lot of you watched that verdict come down on Thursday and thought, well, that's it, it's over. And folks, I understand the feeling, but I have to tell you, this case is not over. Not for Larry Millete, not for the courts, and certainly not for Maya's family. So let's walk through what happens next, step by step, plainly. The first thing you need to know is that Larry has not been sentenced yet. That surprised some people. Normally, after a first-degree murder conviction in California, you'd expect a sentencing date within about a month. But there's a wrinkle in this case. Larry is still facing a separate charge for possession of an assault weapon, and that charge was split off from the murder trial. He reportedly waived his right to a jury on that count, which means Judge Camarena will decide it himself. Larry is due back in court on July 20th, just over a week from now, and it's expected that once that weapons charge is resolved, a sentencing date will finally be set, likely sometime in August, September, or into the fall. And when that sentencing day comes, there isn't much mystery about the number. First-degree murder in California carries a mandatory sentence of 25 years to life in state prison. Larry Millete is 44 years old. He's already been sitting in jail since October of 2021, and that time will count. But do the math with me, folks. Even at the absolute earliest, he would be in his late 60s before he ever sees a parole board. And parole boards do not look kindly on a man who has never said where his victim is. Which brings me to the appeal. Every criminal defense attorney watching this case says the same thing, and I agree with them. Larry will appeal. It's his constitutional right, and in a case of this magnitude, a no-body conviction built entirely on circumstantial evidence, his lawyers would almost be committing malpractice not to. Retired Judge Laura Halgren, who sat on the San Diego County bench for more than 20 years, explained that before sentencing even happens, the defense can file post-trial motions, and the most common one is a motion for a new trial. They could argue juror misconduct, they could argue legal errors, or, most likely in my opinion, they could argue there simply wasn't enough evidence to support premeditation, that finding of first degree rather than second. Now, do I think that motion succeeds? I don't. Judges rarely grant them, and this jury was unanimous on the first vote. But the appeals process could stretch on for years, and Maya's family knows it. Now, here's something else that came up after the verdict, and it's worth sitting with. One criminal defense attorney, David Shapiro, raised the possibility that prosecutors could someday offer Larry an arrangement, something like taking first-degree murder off the table in exchange for information that leads to the recovery of Maya's remains. Whether anything like that ever happens, I don't know. But the fact that lawyers are even discussing it tells you what everyone in San Diego County already understands. This case has a hole in the middle of it, and only one man can fill it. Because, folks, here is the heartbreaking truth of Thursday afternoon. Even in victory, Maya's family did not get her back. Deputy District Attorney Christy Bowles, who carried this case for the state, stood in front of the cameras after the verdict and said that while the verdict was significant, Maya is still missing, and that they continue to hope she'll one day be found so her family can lay her to rest with the dignity she deserves. And Maya's sister, Maricris, the woman who made that first call to police 5.5 years ago, who organized search party after search party in the hills and reservoirs around San Diego County, said justice had been served, but that there was still a second step. In her words, they still have to bring her sister home, to bring her back to the 3 children who have been waiting 5 years. The district attorney herself, Summer Stephan, put out a statement saying justice delayed can never erase years of grief, but that no victim is forgotten. And juror Beverly Feldman said something afterward that I haven't been able to shake. She said there was no winner in that courtroom. She said only Larry knows where Maya is, and that, in her view, that was what he wanted all along. Control, right to the very end. So let me leave you with this. Maya Millete was 39 years old. She was a daughter, a sister, a wife, and above everything else, a mother of 3 children who adored her. On January 7, 2021, she took a step toward a new life, and she has not been seen since. On July 9, 2026, 12 ordinary citizens looked at everything, the Spellcasters, the Hemlock, the searches, the timeline, the 20 years of that marriage, and they said with one voice that her husband took her from this world. The law has now spoken. But until Maya comes home, her family's watch continues. And I hope wherever you are tonight you'll keep them in your thoughts. Now I'd really like to hear from you because this one has people talking. Here's my question for the comments. The jury needed less than 6 hours to convict Larry Millete without a body, without a weapon, and without a crime scene. Do you believe the spellcaster evidence is what sealed this verdict, like juror Feldman said? Or do you think the timeline alone would have been enough to convict him? Put your answer down below, and be kind to each other in those comments, because we can disagree without being unkind. If this video helped you understand the case, please hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell, because we will be right there covering the July 20th hearing and the sentencing when it comes. Thanks so much for spending this time with me, folks. Take care of each other, and I'll see you in the next one.